Welcome to Coastside Poetry, and here we are in June. I think we have a strawberry moon still with us this evening, so what an auspicious time. Thanks for all of you who've zoomed in, and to those who are watching on YouTube. We meet either physically or virtually on the second Tuesday of every month to celebrate spoken poetry. I'm Diane Lee Woomy, and Steve Long and I are your hosts this evening. Our featured poet event is being recorded and streamed live onto YouTube as we speak. So anyone can look at it later. We'll be posting the link on our website, coastsidepoetry.org. This evening, we welcome Nevada City poet Maxima Kahn. Maxima's first full-length collection of poems, Fierce Aria, was published by Finishing Line Press in 2020 and was a finalist for an Eric Hoffer Book Award. Her work has been featured in numerous literary journals, including the Louisville Review, Wisconsin Review, Euphony, Sweet, Poem, and many others, and on popular blogs such as the Creative Penn, Tiny Buddha, and others. She's twice been nominated for Best of the Net, was a finalist for the Atlanta Review Poetry Contest, and has received scholarships and fellowships to the Community of Writers and the Vermont Studio Center. Maxima's taught creative writing at the University of California, Davis Extension, and you can follow her writing life at maximacahn.com. And that's Kahn with HN at the end, not misspelling it like I did at first. Please welcome Maxima Kahn.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Steve, for this beautiful labor of love that you do, bringing poets together and bringing poetry out in the world. I'm always in awe of all of us who do these things to help spread poetry around the world. So thank you. So I think what I'll do tonight is read a couple poems from my book, Fierce Aria, that came out in 2020 from Finishing Line Press. This is the book, Fierce Aria. And then I'm going to read some newer work, and we'll see how that goes. I'm going to start my little timer so I pay attention to the time. I'm going to start with a sad poem because I was feeling sad earlier today, and that's what called out to me. This poem is called Dark Nets. What do you catch in your nets this morning? Black solitudes, weights of iron and lead. What do you haul in? What stains the shore? Veins of tears, hands wringing out the dead, sleepless eyes, and the mirages of fish that slip through your dreams at night. What has whispered by your bedside through the long hours of your fitful sleep? Failure, failure, failure. The shirt you thought you'd shucked, you find clinging to your skin, wet and wretched and heavy. You can't peel it off. It becomes you. Dark nets cast over a darker sea. Lash of water, lash of light. You lean looking for something to count on, to number, and further on to love. Like walking out to the water's edge, crazy with light. And the next one I'm going to read from Fierce Aria is called Wild Earth, and I wrote it after I had a very striking experience some years ago on the land I was living on. I had a kind of epiphany experience with the nature there, experiencing the trees and the rocks where I had been living for many years, calling out to me for more of my attention and affection. And I actually felt very humbled and kind of mortified that I hadn't given them more, but also very moved. And so this poem came out of that. It's called Wild Earth. Wild earth, wild sky, how many times have the stars sung my name and I failed to listen? How many years have the trees been longing for my embrace while I stood apart? How long has the earth risen to meet me, and all things conspired to bring forth my true unfolding, while I stumbled into walls muttering, alone, 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 worn thin, guarding against the worst, all the while the earth calling for my touch. Since the day of my birth, the river has been flowing ready to carry me while I paddled furiously, mustering my will. Now my heart breaks open, hearing the singing, leaning my face against the cool of a rock that reaches for me. The structures that held my life, the false edifices of fear, obligation, guilt, give way, and I stand in wonder, humbled, not knowing who I am. So yeah, I'm going to read some newer poems, we'll see how that goes. They're all things I haven't read at a reading, so that'll be a good adventure for me, and I hope for all of us. The first one I'm going to read was written at the summer solstice of 2020. So here we are almost 2 years later. Of course, this was just a few months into the pandemic and very shortly after the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests were going on. So you'll hear some of the reference to those things in this poem. It's called The Most Available Light. Music from a cheap radio, morning songs of birds concealed among the holly, the garden opulent and unabashed. The image splays naked and forlorn. The imagination hides in the underbrush and pecks at spent seeds. Veined leaves of dogwood dangle in silver light. White and dark gravel, a sea beneath my feet. While human bodies fall, bloodied by human bodies, and peaceful protests turn as the law applies violence, strapped to their hips, armored in chests white with rage. To make something of these. Sunlight lays a hot hand on the back of my neck, inscribes its dazzle inside the curvature of eye and blinds. I'm no closer to salvation than I've ever been. I can't divine what lies beneath those fronds among the crushed decay and new growth. Car horn, bird tweet, all asks to be heard and sung. But the arguments with myself lie down in dust, while day spends its gold profligate. My truest hunger has always been erasure, to disappear inside of things beyond the veil. To call their names is not enough. I pry with fingers at the edges, feeling for the breach, for what opens, what glitters, neither metaphor nor negation of beauty, but source, the root where I cannot be wrong. A fly explores my thumb. Okay. And this next one is called Winter Eruption. We had this, eruption is with an I, and I learned this word because we had an eruption of finches. I think it was last year, but time is so weird for me and all of us, I think, these days that it's hard to keep track. So an eruption of finches is when you get this mass migration of finches certain years. So anyway, it inspired this poem, Winter Eruption. Oh, the other thing I'll say is that I write a lot about the challenge of writing and the challenge of making art and what is it we're doing and why and what we can and cannot do with language. So you'll see that theme threaded through my work. Winter Eruption. To bring the slender world shimmering to the page. Song of humpbacks spiraling through seawater, haunting notes careen off underwater canyons, threading through aquamarine, a melodic meshwork, intricate and lanky as a symphony. Eruption of finches spilling southwards from boreal, meager year after mast year, crop failure causing superflight, pine siskins migrate by night, sparking gold through jade camellia leaves, all the way to Bermuda, only to waste away. To evade the crowded shatter of daily screens, our frantic chatter over screens, illuminate instead the quiet radiance of winter light on bare oak branches. This the work. At times like these, hard seasons of grief, when a hole gapes in the ozone and our breath leaks into lightless space and glittering glaciers calve into a warming sea, we sing again to make visible such as might return us to ourselves. All right, thank you. And I decided that I'm going to read an American sonnet crown that I wrote, which I have not read at a reading before. And it's probably still a work in progress. But again, it's what called to me to read tonight. So a couple things I'll say about it. First of all, a sonnet crown, I want to read you all the definition of a sonnet crown from Wikipedia. A crown of sonnets or sonnet corona is a sequence of sonnets, excuse me, usually addressed to one person and or concerned with a single theme. Each of the sonnets explores one aspect of the theme and is linked to the preceding and succeeding sonnets by repeating the final line of each sonnet as the first line of the next one. And then the first line of the first sonnet is usually repeated as the last line of the last sonnet. So it's this crown of sonnets that are linked thematically and also by this repeating line. I've never done one before, and I was really interested in the challenge, but these are not traditional sonnets. They're not Shakespearean or Petrarchan sonnets. These are American sonnets. And the American sonnet form was developed by Wanda Coleman, African-American poet. And what she said is her intention was kind of break the traditional sonnet form and make it distinctly American. So she did away with iambic pentameter and the rhyme scheme, the metrical scheme, broke it open, but she sought to bring the rhythms and influence of jazz into it and make it distinctly American. So it still adheres to the 14-line form and to lines of roughly 10 syllables, roughly, and then bringing in this sort of jazzy musical element. So my American sonnet sequence was inspired by this amazing book of poetry, American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin by Terrence Hayes. Incredible book of poems. It was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. His poems were all written in the first 200 days of Trump's presidency, and they're all kind of responding to what's going on at the time. But anyway, I was inspired by him, by the American sonnet form, and by a particular sonnet in his book that begins with this line: "Probably twilight makes blackness dangerous darkness." Probably twilight makes blackness dangerous darkness. And so my first sonnet in the crown references this sonnet of his quite heavily and plays with it. And then I go on from there. Okay, so this is my sequence, my crown of sonnets, and it's called American Sonnet Crown for Terrence Hayes and Kin. Probably whiteness has always been toxic privilege. Probably all my encounters are riddled with hidden accessions, which is to say, how can we survive with all of the bullshit that happens in Tulsa and Birmingham, Central Park and San Francisco? Even in my sleepy town, some people will drag humanity through the dirt like rags while they proudly hoist their bullshit flags. I admit it. Paleness is a pale reward for killing your brothers and sisters. The white church sings skin like a sheet of paper is a ticket into some false heaven. Probably God had dark blue skin like you when twilight spun the wheeling stars into luminous blackness. The stars wheel into luminous blackness, while down on earth we shudder with birth throes, or is it death? We come apart and rise like dough. On screen, I watch peaceful protesters shot with tear gas and rubber bullets and worse, and weep and write. But what good does it do? These metaphors are meant to raise alarm or stitch the fabric by which we feel our common bond as they march to assert the value of each Black life. But though doves fly from the roof of my mouth, my feet are sunk in the mud of history. I try to wrench free, not to deny, but gain some height by which I see at last all humanity free at last. Thank God Almighty. When we are free at last, we will thank God Almighty. Or should we do it now, before? Should we advance as a race toward the end of the race wars, toward the end of all war? Should we hurl every bomb in the sea? But the sea is holy too, and we should clean our wretched mess. I grow impatient, furious, and lean too heavily on hope until it breaks. My hands are helpless rags. I cannot stand the sight of blood. And what of God? Where is she now? Or is it we have turned our backs on one another? Her sacred promise withers in the dust. Our sacred promise withers in the dust, what we should have kept and failed to do. Like some engagement ring left in the dirt to rust, we spurned the garden given in love to us. The planet green and bountiful with food, we turned to wasteland in our restless greed. The pact to care for one another as kin became a language we no longer read. Out of fashion, out of date. Is it too late to save our souls? We try to legislate against brutality, ensure the rights of every man, woman, child through law, but leave the milk of human kindness to sour in the heat, distrustful of the human heart. But can the human heart be trusted? Can it be altered, healed, molded, melded, made good? Once poisoned with hate and fear, can it ever be made to run clear like some sweet mountain stream? I cling to hope of transformation like a dream. One murderer embraced by the mother of his victims melts in her arms, becomes her son. Still, I cannot forgive much smaller slights, carry thorns embedded in my skin from years ago. If you scrape one such wound, I might explode, and still I hope to offer service to this world. Take these worthless hands and shape some art to help us remember our beginnings in that deep place where all the ladders start. It never was foul where the ladders start, that sacred rag and bone shop of the heart. The great poet had it wrong. We all make mistakes. Lord knows I have and do, but never knowingly wronged another on account of skin, nor would. I stand with you, my brother, shout, because a world in which you are not safe and blessed is no kind of world where I can rest. I will not suffer to watch the twilight dimmed that glistens in your beautiful skin. So I study, learn, and listen at your well where the deepest waters collect and heal. The arc of the moral universe is long, but together we can bend it away from wrong. Only together do we bend away from wrong, from irreparable harm to bodies and our souls, to culture, poetry, music, all we love. I grow taller when I put my hand in yours, look in your eyes and see myself mirrored. Own hatred of myself, rejection, blame, the many ways I've shamed and judged my Jewish blood, unwelcome also in the great white myth. My people hunted, haunted through generations. Probably there is no undoing of these scars, no reparation that could ever set it right. Probably grief will always keep me up at night. When I see your beautiful black face, I weep. Whiteness has always been toxic. Always. Thank you. So let's see how I'm doing here. Oh, I have a little time. So I had thought to end there, so perhaps I will, because I know we have a bunch of readers and I'll get to give us one for the road at the end. So I think I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maxima. Wow. Wow. I would like to invite folks to unmute and share their thoughts. Actually, let's make some noise first, and then thank you so much. Yay! Yeah. Something we miss in Zoom would be good to keep doing it. So.
So I've written sonnets before, but I've never heard of the sonnet crown. And I was really inspired by the American sonnet you told us about. So I'm going to see if I can find that book. It sounds like a really good one. And your sonnet crown was really powerful. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm simply gobsmacked.
Thank you.
I'm blown away, and I wish I could write like that.
I liked how
Yeah.
you drove it. I liked how you drove it forward with those inner rhymes that really move things, and they're really great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was remarkable, the whole reading, but it's particularly the sonnet crown, Maxima. I think everyone here is going to go home and try one.
Yeah, good, right? That's
Well,
I think,
actually, Sandra, Maxima, you gave me a name for something, and I don't think I probably invented it, but it's now going to be a haiku crown, which I've already been writing, where they follow each other and pick up on each other and come round. So thank you for naming. But yeah, sonnet crown right now sounds too daunting, but maybe in a little while.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's usually 7, isn't it, Maxima?
I think so.
I seem
and
to
mine-
recall that's like the
Yeah.
traditional circle of it. Yeah.
That's right. And mine was 7. And yeah, and then there's like even crazier is the heroic or something crown, which is like 15, and it gets even more complicated. I was
I've
not
heard of
going
those.
there.
I think seven's the best I'd ever do. It's a nice sacred number. We'll stick
Yeah.
with 7.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
After the 7th sonnet, I rested.
Well, thank you, Maxima. Let me take this out. Thank you, Maxima. That was a spectacular reading. We're so lucky been present for it. I really thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and I encourage you all to try the American sonnet. I hadn't heard of a sonnet crown or an American sonnet, the form. And what I loved about the American sonnet form, at first I felt kind of daunted by the idea of like, even though much of the structure is let go of by this idea of like, how do I bring in these sort of jazz rhythms, right? Because you'll notice from the other poems I read, this isn't what I normally do, but it really was fun to sort of bring in more musicality. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I'd just like to add from my own study of the sonnet and other forms is that although most people seem to feel wedded to the concept of iambic pentameter for the traditional sonnet, it does not have to be. There can be, you can use like trochaic tetrameter. You can use amphibrax, which is something I really like, which is da 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 da. There's a lot of different meters that you can use, and if you want to get musicality, it's fun to play with those different meters. So anyway, I'll go quietly now. So, well, thank you so much again. And we'll stop recording in a moment. Those of you in the Zoom room, please stay online if you'd like to take part in the open mic. And thanks to all our YouTube listeners. Please tune in for our next regular Coastside poetry event on, I didn't change it. It's July, well, the second Tuesday in July. I'll be sending it out anyway, when we'll welcome. So that brings us to the end of the recorded program. Thanks so much for joining us at Coastside Poetry and for helping to keep the lamps of poetry burning.